Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
And welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today I am joined by Kienna Shaw. Kienna is someone that I have been able to follow and interact with a lot on Twitter, and it is an absolute pleasure to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Kienna.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me on. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. It's definitely a blast to follow you on Twitter, and I believe listen to you on occasion on Lady Slaying Dragons, which was always a great listen when I had the time to listen to it.
Thank you. Super glad that put out fun and interesting things on the internet.
You're talking into the void, and the void is talking back.
Surprise! It speaks.
Oh my goodness. Now, you have a lot of fandoms that you are into, and some of the ones I don't believe we've ever discussed on the podcast before. So this is new territory on some of them, and I'm excited to dive in. And the first one that you are interested in is something called Rusty Lake Cube Escape. What is Rusty Lake Cube Escape?
So Rusty Lake is actually a game company. They're an indie game company based, trying to remember what part of Europe, but essentially the Rusty Lake game series or the Cube Escape game series is a series of puzzle point-and-click games which have this very gothic horror kind of feel to it. It's super interesting because the Cube Escape series is completely free. You can play it online, on your phone, on Steam, all for free, and it's all kind of set in in a room in a cube. And so essentially, you're trying to get out of the room in some way. So there's that aspect of it. But the really cool thing is that each of the games are connected to each other through shared lore and the such, and you can play them in any order to kind of get the full sense of the story. And then the Rusty Lake games are set in the same universe. They're just the premium games. They have a handful of those, but they're only about $3 each, so totally worth it. So yeah, they're essentially point-and-click gothic horror puzzle games where you're trapped in a room and you got to get out.
That sounds awesome. How did you find them or get into the games?
Yeah, so I actually stumbled across the Cube Escape games about 3 years ago or so. Actually, more like 4, I think. And I kind of just fell in love with them and just, I played through all the ones they had available at the time, and then ended up just kind of keep following them and keeping an eye on which games came out, saw their first premium games and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it was just, kind of when you're going through Tumblr or Twitter or whatever, it's like, hey, check out this cool game. And you just kind of click it and you end up going down a rabbit hole of lore and really cool things. So yeah.
Okay. Is Cube Escape, as far as the art style, I know you said it's got a gothic, creepy thing going on. Is it more like a point and click type puzzle, or is it something where you're guiding a character around and the character's interacting with the cube?
It's definitely a point and click. So you're definitely kind of just, clicking on everything. And, with any point and click game, there are sometimes points where you're like, I have this object. Can I apply it to anything in this room? Can I use the matches on the wood? Can I use the matches on the lamp? Can I use the matches on the bird? But yeah, so point and click. And it's they're not going for realism. It's very much a hand-drawn, hand-painted kind of style.
Okay.
All of the backgrounds are beautifully done, hand-painted backgrounds, and then mostly fairly stylized people or objects and the such.
Okay, that sounds neat. I'll have to check it out. It's something I've never heard of. When you sent over the information, I was like, I have no clue what this is at all.
Yeah, it's definitely of the indie game kind of sphere, but it's one series that I always recommend to people. Because the games are they're challenging and they're puzzles, but they're not like impossible. Um, and again, there's this very complex and intricate lore that ties all of them together. You're kind of following this one family and all the terrible things that has happened to them and that they've done, both from the perspective of being a family member and from being somebody on the outside.
Okay, cool. I was going to ask you about the lore, and I was curious about how the lore connects not only from like in the stories, but in the you said that it connected throughout the different games. I was wondering if it was like a particular type of like fantasy or sci-fi or like just gothic, like following like a some kind of storyline set in like current age or within like our the realm of like history.
Yeah, it kind of takes place in history. It's definitely not doesn't take place in modern day. I would place it around like the early 1900s.
Okay.
So you know you have phones, but they're you know the the typical old fashioned phones, and then you know the dress and such tends to tell of an older time. But yeah, so essentially it all of the games center around the Vanderboom family and all the terrible things that happen to them and that they do. So it's really fascinating to kind of piece everything together. And so you switch between playing, you know, within their own timeline and as well with the first games um, as Detective Vandermeer, who is investigating the death of a Vanderboom and kind of just gets accidentally entrenched in all of the bizarre, um, bizarre happenings around this family. There's a lot of themes about death and rebirth and memories, which kind of get symbolically represented through the cube. So both the room
Hmm.
itself is a cube, but also there are the black and white cubes of memories that you can pick up. Um, and the one also the occurring thing is a kind of a monster, this black shadowy humanoid figure that kind of likes to pop up and freak you out. But but it tends to be thought of, you know, as perhaps as a corruption. This that seemed to kind of be entrenched into the Vanderboom family. So it's really interesting that you to kind of piece all these things together. Um, of the different games. And again, you don't have to play them in a particular order. You can play them in any order, and eventually they kind of start clicking together.
Okay. Is it as far as like the puzzles go? I know some games are really I don't want to say difficult, but I know that there have been games where I've tried to do puzzles in within like the games and it's not something that just works. What's the difficulty level on figuring things out as far as your opinion on it?
I personally think they're very good at balancing challenging and frustrating. So you know that it's challenging. It makes you think. A lot of them are pretty logic based puzzles, um, but or like pattern picking and the such. But a great thing that I really love about Rusty Lake and what they do is they have walkthroughs available, official walkthroughs available for anybody to use. And it's very easy to access from a game menu too. And it'll pop you right into the section of the game that you're actually stuck in. So actually see that, oh, you're doing this room and this puzzle. Here, we're going to, when you click on the I need a walkthrough, we're going to pop you right into the video at the exact time stamp for that puzzle.
Oh
So
wow, that's
so
awesome.
yeah, so they're really great about, you know, there's no shame in, you know, needing some help. We want to make sure that you still experience the game and the story. Um, however you like. Of course, it's always fun to come up with your own, but sometimes you're like, oh, I I skipped ahead 2 steps in my brain, um, and I forgot that there was a point B between there that I needed to do to get to the next step. So, so yeah, so that's one thing that I really like about them, because there's a lot of those games out there tend to fall into the thing where if you have no idea what to do, you're stuck forever, and
Oh gosh, yes.
the game doesn't help you, right? It's kind of like, well, shit, there you go. But no, they're very Rusty Lake is very open about how the puzzles work and just being like, oh yeah, you need a little help here? Here, have the walkthrough that we filmed completely for you if you need it.
Yeah, or you go on sites like GameFAQs, and it's like, oh yeah, the thing that you needed, you should have gotten about 3 hours ago, and there's no way to go back and get it. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So it's also good at that because it tends to be set in only one space. You know that you can't accidentally go like 10 rooms down and realize, I needed that one thing from
Hmm
10 rooms back. They're very good at they're very good at keeping everything. You can do puzzles at your own whatever order you like, but certain things need to be done in order to get the next stage or whatever. So it helps it they manage to confine it in a way that doesn't feel railroaded, but still keeps you on the right path and doesn't just abandon you and into this cruel world that they have created.
Oh my gosh. What's like the average time just spitballing as far as like one game to from start to finish?
So for the Cube Escape ones, the free ones, they tend to average, well, anywhere between half an hour to 2 hours. Depends on how quick you are with puzzle solving and how stubborn you are. I'd be like, no, I'm gonna get this without the walkthrough. The premium games go more around anywhere between 2 to 6 hours. Um, Again, depending on what your pace of puzzles and exploring everything that you would like to do. So yeah, they kind of they're great and really digestible games, but they don't feel too abrupt.
That's really good, especially with the price point that you're coming in at with either free or just, a couple dollars to get that amount of gameplay is pretty good.
Yeah, they're very good at that, and they've been amazing about that too. I think they've only had one Kickstarter, and that was for their most recent game. Man, I'm blanking on the name all of a sudden. Oh, Rusty Lake Paradox. Which the reason why they had a Kickstarter is they also created a short film to go with it.
Okay.
And the really fascinating thing is that the short film, if you play through the game the second time, the short film gives you clues on how to approach it differently on your second go through
Oh, okay,
to get a
cool.
different kind of ending.
That's really neat.
Yeah, so it was a very fascinating way of doing it, and they're super great with the Kickstarter and all that. But other than that, they've been a very independent group, delivering very solid content over the past few years.
Okay. Do you prefer playing it on like a computer, or are you a mobile gamer on it?
I definitely play them on the computer, but they definitely do a very good job of doing the intuitive apps things from what I've seen and heard from other people. Um, I mean, one part of the thing is that you kind of have to use arrows to kind of flip through the different walls and ceiling of the room, and so they're able to incorporate that into a touch motion fairly easily and all that stuff. So, personally, I play them online on the website on Steam, but they do a good job of making it accessible and not frustrating or an afterthought on a mobile platform.
Yeah, especially with, I know sometimes when they say like, "Oh, look, the game is on your phone," and you're kind of wondering, how is that game going to work on this small screen with no controls?
Right, yeah, like a click could be anything. It could be I'm clicking on a thing or I'm swiping or right there has to be way more thought put into how those type of nuances are translated onto a touch screen. So I personally think they did a very good job.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to check it out because I'm looking for games where it's not me sitting down and an investment of, okay, I need to sit for at least an hour or two before I can save or give up or feel like I've done something. And this sounds a little bit right up my alley of needing just something to, load up and play for a little bit and then be done.
Yeah, and the save system is very autosave. They'll kind of just, you know, keep you on track, so you're not like kind of. I've had the game crash on me before. Like, no, not all that progress, but they save it. So um, that's another nice thing is that you don't have to worry about saving things. They just they're like, okay, it allows you to put the game down whenever you need to, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Hmm.
Awesome. I'll have to definitely check it out. I'm really happy that you're here to talk about that game because I know that with small publishers, it's hard for them to sometimes get attention and everything. And it's nice to actually hear about games that aren't, you know, some of the big names that are out there right now.
Yeah. Again, it's a series I've been very into, and basically any chance I get to be like, "Hey, play this game," uh, I shout about it. So always glad to talk about it.
Well, I am glad that you did. And from game to television show now, and I have to say this is probably one of my favorite television shows that's actually on TV right now, which is rare because I don't watch a lot of like actual TV shows that are airing. Um, and I try and catch it every week. But you are a fan of The Good Place.
Yes, I love The Good Place. I love it so much.
How did you get into it? Were you originally someone that watched it right when it started airing, or did you get into it later?
I got into it later. I watched it on Netflix actually, so season 3's not out for me yet, and I
Hmm.
need to. But no, yeah, I ended up hearing about it actually quite. I probably when it first started coming out. Um, and I'm a university student, and I'm doing a minor in philosophy, and I do a lot of when I talk about philosophy with anybody, it tends to be in a way that I try to break it down in the easiest, most fun way possible. And
Hmm.
so a bunch of people were like, Kienna, you really need to watch The Good Place. It's right up your alley. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it at some point. I don't have that much time. And like I've been kind of moving away from watching TV shows and stuff. I very purposely didn't save the Netflix password onto my computer because I was like, I can't have this risk of time sinking in university. But then I kind of decided, whatever, I'll do it. And then, yeah, I was just had one weekend alone. All of my roommates and my partner had gone out for the weekend, and so I was like, you know what? Today's the day that I'm gonna watch this TV show, this TV series that everyone keeps yelling at me about, and here I am. I think I binged the whole thing in that weekend, both
Nice.
seasons. Whoops, you know.
I don't. I don't think that you. I could say that that's a whoops. That's just a really good idea.
Yeah, it was just so hard. It was so hard to put it down. It was so hard. So, yep, just binged it in 2 days, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made with a any form of watching media.
Oh wow, that's high praise right there.
Yeah.
I know for me, when like I always try and follow certain actors or actresses, and one of the people I love is Kristen Bell, and I'm like, oh, there's a new show coming out, and I don't know much about it, but I'll check it out, and I did, and man, it is much more than I ever thought it would be, and between the first twist at the end and then second season, it's like, oh my gosh, like this is really hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, it does. It's super great because yeah, I read this article that was basically like saying The Good Place is the smartest series on television, and I think a lot. it kind of goes through these arguments, but basically, it does talk about one of the reasons why it's a smart show is that it talks about philosophy, more particularly ethics, which is a very difficult topic to talk about to anybody on a casual basis. And then they turn it into a television series, and not just any television series, a sitcom. It's just kind of like wild. And then from there, not just not just a sitcom, right? Because the thing with a lot of sitcoms is that you end up getting into, the same tropes or the same kind of repetitiveness and this predictability. And The Good Place manages to keep you on your toes. And it never feels preachy, and it never feels like a sitcom, like you would imagine a sitcom about ethics would be like.
Mm-hmm.
So they're incredibly clever with all that, which I highly admire. And again, as somebody who's doing a philosophy minor, specifically in ethics, it's kind of just it's a very pleasing thing to me to be like, all these people now understand these concepts, and I can talk to them about it, and they understand.
I was going to ask you, because of your minor, how well does the show hit with what they're talking about?
Oh, they do it fantastically. They're very good at, again, philosophy is unfortunately one of those disciplines that likes to entrench itself in incredibly long-winded words and phrases and papers. When it's a kind of an inaccessible field of knowledge, when I think it should be one of the most accessible, because it's one of the things that help dictate our lives and how we think and how we do things. And so kind of watching the show, they really did their research, and they did it very well. And it's great because they never take a very specific point of view. They always present these things as and all of their complex nuances. One of my favorite episodes was the trolley problem episode.
Mm-hmm.
Just because there's always the thing with the trolley problem is that it's a very popular ethical model, but it had a lot of issues with it, because the trolley problem is basically supposed to illustrate that things are not as straightforward as they seem, and that decision making is not just about morality in terms of like the good of the situation, but also all these other factors. And unfortunately, that gets lost with a lot of other portrayals of the trolley problem. But with the Good Place episode, they're very much like it. Yep, trolley problem's hard. Most of the time, you can't make a decision on time. Yeah, but no, yeah, they clearly did their research, and from my understandings of the behind the scenes stuff, they really, really read and delved into each concept, and it really shows. And I think that's just a fantastic thing to see, is that the philosophy is not just and here's the moral of the story. That's what we see in so many shows. It's there's a whole complex viewpoint of philosophy being presented. The fact that it's more about what do we owe to each other as humans, and then here are all the different ways that you can approach it, right? The ethics that are available to us in the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, who is your favorite character on the show?
Oh no. I love all of them. But I think I absolutely adore Chidi, just because she reminds me of myself, and a lot of myself. Just being like, yep, indecisiveness. This is why everyone hates ethics people. That whole bit is very funny to me. But I also love Janet. Janet, I have a soft spot for any form of AI characters, and then Janet is just done super well and freaking hilarious.
Oh gosh, I love Janet. Janet might be my personal favorite character, just because she's she starts off as this character that you're just like, okay, cool. She's like that helper, and through the 2 seasons has evolved into this really complex character where they're exploring things where no Janet should have even ever explored, and they're having to kind of deal with some of those like repercussions of what they've done.
Yeah, and just Darcy is very good at delivering Janet's lines in a way that is very convincing as like I'm a computer. Um, but a computer that is starting to evolve and have all these complex things, and it's great. No, yeah, Janet is Janet and Sheedy are probably my top ones, although I love all of them. They're all very well written, lovable characters in all their own unique ways.
I was just thinking, because I'm old, so I'm nearing 40, and I was thinking, Terminator presents that whole like AI taking over like evil mean robots, and then I'm like, I wouldn't mind the Janet so much. Janet would be okay. Scary robots, not so much. Janet, okay.
And I guess we have to figure out which Janet.
I would like the good Janet, please, not the bad Janet, because the bad Janet scares me.
Bad Janet is very creative in a lot of ways. So yeah, Bad Janet's funny, and I love how they visually represent that character. Like the good Janet's dressed in a very specific kind of way, and the bad Janet's dressed in a very specific kind of way, and how like that
Right.
all the visual design of all the characters really are done really well to kind of portray who they are, and kind of they take again your first visual interpretation of them at their sitcom trope, and then kind of just flipping them over their heads, and then flipping them again, and flipping them again.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about, or I guess my question is, did you, when you're watching the show, did you come to the realization of the first season twist before it was presented, or were you as shocked as a lot of other people were about where everyone was?
Oh, that I don't think I think it was one of those instances where I didn't see it coming, but when it happened, I'm like, oh, that explains all of these things that I kind of had questions about. It kind of it's one of those things where you're it's a surprise, but after a moment you're not surprised anymore.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those ones where you're looking back on it and you're like, yeah, I totally see like the foundations that they led, that they put down, and they're leading you on this path. And why wasn't I smart enough to understand that when they were showing this?
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those good twists, right, where there actually is precedence and there is evidence and, like you said, a foundation put into place that now you see in hindsight 2020. Rather than poorly executed plot twist where it's like, where did that come from? That came out of nowhere. That makes no sense. Okay.
What do you mean? What do you mean this character is not the character that I'm thinking of? Like, you had no foundation for this whatsoever. How dare you? But with The Good Place, it's definitely just totally opposite. It's got that foundation. It's one of those shows where, like, leading up to the next season, you are happy to go back and rewatch it to catch everything that you might have missed, and just be ready for that next season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something I'm going to be doing when when season 3 finally gets up onto Netflix. Is just go back to season 2 and just watch all that again.
Definitely. It's always a good thing to do. Moving from The Good Place to, I guess, kind of a good representation, possibly, of where they are or where they were, is a game called Undertale, which I've heard about, but I've never seen played or know much about. So, what is Undertale?
Oh man, Undertale. So Undertale again, it's a video game created by Toby Fox. Where it kind of starts off as what you think is a typical RPG with a lot of inspirations in retro pixel styles alongside Japanese RPG. And so you go into this game kind of expecting this one experience, and throughout the way, you start to kind of question a lot of things in terms of, your impact and your choices. Especially in terms of, how it really plays with the framework of these types of games, RPG games, where you go out into the wild world and you go and fight monsters, gain XP, level up, until you get to the end and defeat the big bosses and all that stuff. And it kind of takes that whole framework, and in the kind of the same way that how The Good Place takes a sitcom and then subverts it, but also it's still a love letter to the original form. This is the same thing. It subverts your typical ideas of, do you actually have to kill the monsters? Is that the only way through a game, right? Can you do other things? Can you show acts of mercy? Can you befriend your enemies? So it's very fascinating and very like heart-wrenching and warming kind of game. As you, again, all of your choices matter, and that's a extremely fascinating thing to play through.
That sounds like a game right up your alley with philosophy and ethics, because it sounds very much that you're going to have to make those decisions, especially in a game that's geared to where people have been doing those games of fight the bad guys, defeat the bad guys, move on, and keep doing it until the end of the game, where you have now this game where you may not have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you question, what is the better way? Because when you go through the actions of, of talking and sparing your enemies rather than, killing them, you never level up. You never get more powerful, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's this kind of, you have to make that conscious decision to never hurt anyone, or to only hurt certain enemies, or to only do X, Y, Z. You have to kind of make that choice, and how the world reacts to you and those choices that you make changes. So I'm sure if for anyone who's had played through it or has heard of it, there tends to be three main routes, quote unquote. One where you kill everything as you would in a normal, RPG. There's one where you kind of do a mix, whatever you feel like. And then there's the one that's the pacifist ending, or the pacifist route, where you don't hurt anybody. And it's very interesting because that's the first time round I accidentally killed somebody when I was trying to do the pacifist route. And so I reset my game, but the game remembered that I hurt somebody in my first go about. And it reminds you. It's like, you felt guilty, didn't you? And now you're back here again. So yeah, it's very meta in many, many ways, but done in a very elegantly and impactful way, I think.
How did you find out about this game?
Actually, my dad was the first person to tell me about it, which is, normally not the way that these things go, especially for newer games. But he had read an article about a game where the purpose is to present you with different options other than just defeating your enemies. So that was the first time I heard about it, and that would have been about a month or two after Undertale was first announced as a game. And then I kind of didn't think about it for a while. And then some of my favorite YouTubers, gaming YouTubers that I watch online, started kind of playing it. Now it's like, it's one of those games where you kind of have to experience, where if you want to experience for yourself, you should, and you should play it first. And so I'm like, all right, let's do this. So that's ended up that's basically how I ended up hearing about it. It's like first from my dad, and then afterwards from other people who were playing it and experiencing it for the first time.
That's especially watching people play it. nowadays is something where it's nice to be able to do that, to kind of know like, hey, maybe this game is of interest to me. And then at least, you're not, I guess I equate it to when I was younger, like reading about the game and being like, oh wow, this game looks really cool, and then spending money and then that game's not for me. And now we have this world that we live in of, I could probably go on to Twitch right now and find someone streaming a game that I'm interested in, and being able to see if it's a game that I'd be interested in, like to actually pick up. And just being able to get that entry point in and get your feet wet without even having to invest the money is really good.
Yeah, for sure. And it gives you a taste of it without, having to spoil the whole experience for yourself, like the same way that you might if you had to, read up about it on Wikipedia or whatever.
Exactly. Or look at box art, which I remember back in the 80s, it was always like, okay, well, let me look at the box art. Oh, the box art looks kind of cool. Buy the game. It's not a game that I liked anymore. Let me see if I can sell it and find a different game.
Yeah, so if I honestly think that, there, I know there's a lot of people who are like, why would you want to watch people play games? And then it's just like, well, that's a good reason, just wanting to get a taste for it, but also being able to experience it through somebody else's perspective too. It's also a fascinating thing to do. Kind of being like, oh, that's an interesting way that somebody, did that choice differently than me if you had played the game, or just, kind of like watching your friend play a game, right? Which is always a fun times.
Absolutely. It's always one of the things I enjoyed when I had sleepovers as a kid, was playing and or watching, especially like the Final Fantasy games. And it's like, we're doing this together. Sure, one of us is, doing the controls, but it's a shared experience.
Yeah, and sharing that experience of having a game together is always a fun time.
Now, as far as Undertale goes, would you recommend it to people that are into those like those type of, traditional role playing type games? Is it more for somebody that's looking for like a casual game? Is it something where I need to sit down for a couple hours each time and play it, or can I just pick it up and do a few things and put it back down?
It's definitely a little more intensive in terms of the time investment that you have to have for each game, like for each session between saves. But I'd recommend it to a lot of people. Anyone was into the traditional RPG games. A lot of it is you have to be a person who is invested in stories and enjoys story in games, for sure. But that tends to go with the RPG genre, anyways. Um, but I I would actually very much recommend it to anyone who's interested in narrative design in games, whether that's video games or even tabletop gaming. It's a very good experience because again, it's the type of game that takes a very typical format, a familiar format, and then subverts it without disrespecting the original format of it,
Hmm.
and plays with it. But no, yeah, I think, and even the combat tends to be a bullet hell. um, very very short burst of bullet hell, but they tend to be at a reasonable difficulty for people who aren't great at bullet hell. Cough me, but it's so yeah, I'd recommend it to any varying level of whether they're a casual gamer or very hardcore. Again, you kind of have to sit down for about an hour or so, maybe between saves to get things done. Um, but I think it's worth it, just for the experience of the full game itself.
Okay, and it definitely does have that replayability factor
Hmm.
of being able to go through, if you want to kill everything or not kill anything, or figure out who you're going to kill and not kill. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so that's the fascinating thing, and as well, it remembers you, and it remembers what choices you made in the past too. So that's another fascinating aspect of it. But yeah, you can definitely replay it, and there's so much to explore too. Like you could talk to all the NPCs, or you couldn't, or you could just kind of ignore them. There's there's a freedom in how much you want to explore the setting and the story and the such, which is great.
That's really cool. I'm again, it's something I know that a lot of the people that I follow have played it or have mentioned it before. And it's definitely one of those games where it keeps popping up enough to where I might have to, if I don't decide to like invest my time in it to play it, I might just find someone to watch online that's playing it and follow their progress.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are very into it, and the great thing is that people get into doing the voices for the characters, and kind of building out this investment into the characters and the story, and there's a wonderful community that's kind of sprung up around it on all sorts of online forums, Tumblr, Twitter, so on and so forth. So it's a really great um great game that seems to kind of captured a whole bunch of people's hearts.
That's very cool. And I know you mentioned tabletop gaming when you're talking about Undertale. And that is probably the first inkling of how I came across you on Twitter was through tabletop role playing.
Yep, it's tabletop gaming, connecting people all across the world, all across the internet, one game at a time.
How did you first get into tabletop role playing?
Um, so it's kind of funny that we're all talking through these things. So I've been following Holly Conrad for a while. And I used to watch her YouTube videos. And then one day she was like, "Oh hey, I'm joining a Dungeons and Dragons game over on the official Wizards of the Coast channel." And I'm like, "What's Dungeons and Dragons?" And this would have been about whew, 3 years ago. And it was about a time where I was kind of going through a creative crisis. Um, I'm I consider myself a storyteller, and so but I just wasn't finding the medium that really stuck with me at the time. And so I was like, oh, I guess I'll go see what this Dungeons and Dragons thing is about. And so I started watching Dice Camera Action on Twitch, and then just kind of fell in love with the whole game. And then here I am now, doing a game almost every day of the week. And yeah, and then being part of this lovely community that we're both part of.
That is one of the things, and I say it probably every time I talk to a tabletop role player, especially the ones that I've met through Twitter, is that when I joined Twitter, I had always heard, oh, Twitter is just terrible. It's, the cesspool of the internet. But then the tabletop role playing community is by and large probably one of the friendliest and more inclusive, like groups of people that I've ever come across, like really supportive and friendly. And, hey, I need people for a game. And people are like, oh, yeah, I'll join that game, or throwing out ideas, or just even witnessing like creative endeavors starting off at just a conversation between one or two people, and then it becomes like this entire game system or podcast or role playing group, and it's so incredible. Like, just that community is great.
Yeah, I absolutely adore it. And of course, there are, as with any place, there are a couple of issues, but I honestly think that the connection and the creative synergy, that's a weird term to use, but I'm using it. That's what I'm going with. Really just kind of fits together. And it was really the online community, especially on Twitter, that kept me in role playing games when I had a very rocky start to my own starting to play. So after watching Dice Camera Action for a while, I'm like, I want to run on my own. I want to play in a game. And unfortunately, my first game was not a great experience. I experienced misogyny, bit of racism, all that fun stuff. And the Twitter community and the live streaming community is really what kept me in and
Mm-hmm.
kept me hopeful that maybe that was just a shitty table. Um, Maybe I just have to look for the right people and
Mm-hmm.
well, and that I was welcome at the table, and so eventually I did find the right group with some good friend of mine, and then one day I was going through things, and a Twitch live stream followed me, and so I started following them, and things just kind of exploded from there.
In a good way, I hope.
In a very good way. It's kind of weird to look back the timeline of things and be like, oh man, that seems like forever ago, and also no time at all.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, I think I'm getting into about 2 years of playing uh, tabletop gaming, and about a year and a half of streaming. So it's kind of really interesting to think about it and how much I've grown and how much it's how many awesome people I've gotten to meet and now call my friends because of this this wonderful connection that we all have because of our shared love of a very nerdy hobby.
Absolutely. What are some of your favorite role-playing games?
Ooh, so D&D 5th edition will always have my heart as the first system that I ever played, first game I ever
Mm-hmm.
did. Um, but I've fallen in love with Call of Cthulhu, both 7th edition and Pulp Call of Cthulhu. Um, really, really fun to play. I also have really enjoyed the very simple the simple, very fun games that the like Honey Heist, or
Mm-hmm.
kind of just like I'm gonna sit down and do some silly things like pretend to be a bear criminal for an hour, which has been great. And I've also been thoroughly enjoying the Powered by the Apocalypse systems, particularly Lady Blackbird has been one that I absolutely love. And that's a game by John Harper. And I've been running a game in it. It's been awesome. So yeah, those are kind of my top ones. But I've been lucky to be able to play in a whole bunch of different systems, and I think all of those experiences have been very valuable. And always a good time because you're playing with friends and having and telling a lovely story together and having fun.
Oh, definitely. Is there like a trope that you tend to play, or when you join a game or when you're playing in a game, do you try to differ your characters up?
Um, Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think if you kind of look at the overall kind of characters, there tends to be some themes that pop up. I never aim to do them; they just happen to show up. Um, I play a lot of LGBTQ plus coded characters. I play a lot of Asian coded characters in general. But in terms of like character tropes and stuff, I tend to play either very sweet, kind but could kick your ass characters, or the very kind of gruff, with a heart of gold. And I also have these characters that are basically the outsiders, um, but they're good intentioned. Um, so like I play a warforged barbarian who's essentially a robot, um, outsider, has a kill code that is their raging. But they mean no harm. They're just a sweet killer robot. But no, I really character creation is one of my favorite things, and I try really hard to flesh out all characters that I do, and make them unique in their own ways.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely one of those things where I think, and especially with like the podcast and the Twitch streams that people now have really a lot more access to than even a few years ago, it's definitely eye opening to where you're now getting these really rich, deep, like backstories or character connections between the characters to really drive the story forward versus, okay, I'm playing, a human fighter, let's play and go from there.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about all these shows is that they really are quite story focused, and that's what really draws people in. The investment in the characters and the setting and the story, and you can really see and feel that shared love between not only the players and the game master, but also the people who are watching and who are supporting the show.
Absolutely. Is there a game that you haven't played but you really want to?
Ooh. Hmm. Hmm. My brain's trying to go through all the hundreds of systems out there. Um, I know I've been kind of, on the Twitterverse and stuff, Retroverse, the D&D
Yep.
supplement and all that, has looked really fun. And I've been kind of really interested, and I've been following both the creators, Snickle Socks and Lewis, and seeing what amazing stuff they've been coming up with. So I've really been I'm very intrigued by it, and I can't wait for whatever Kickstarter product comes out for that. Um, but Tales from the Loop is one that I've been really interested in and hoping to try at some point. Um, it's this kind of combination of sci-fi and surrealism and realism that I am very intrigued by, and hoping. Well, I'm sure at some point I'll be able to get into a one shot or something and give it a try.
Definitely. I've noticed that Tales from the Loop is one of those games where it seems like more people are finally either getting their hands on the book or finally getting into like the PDF or whatnot. Because I've been seeing a lot of Twitch streams lately of either one shots of Tales from the Loop or even a few like ongoing or mini kind of like mini campaigns going on with it.
Yeah, for sure. Which is another great thing about Twitch live streams or YouTube shows of these of tabletop games is that there's sudden exposure to all these variety of games because we all love Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, it's the center of tabletop gaming community, but there's so many other games out there that provide so many different types of opportunities and awesome potential for stories and the such. And it's super great to be able to explore and to find the right system and game for you.
Oh, definitely. It's one of those things where, and I've talked with a number of different guests where like back when I started gaming, my gaming store carried like Dungeons and Dragons, and they carried the White Wolf stuff like Vampire and Werewolf, and then there was Star Wars and there was Rifts, and that was really about it. And now, jumping forward the 20 years or so, you have games that are focused on anywhere from like monsters or science fiction, relationships, superheroes, running a record store from like Hannah Schaefer's Damn the Man game that was on Kickstarter. There's just so many different things where you don't need to have a physical copy of a book anymore because we live in the digital age of, well, people can pull it up on their phones or their iPads and have the book right there, and instead of paying $50 for it, you've paid $10.
Yeah, it's this renaissance of tabletop gaming. I think really comes down to accessibility. That gaming is for everybody. And we're really starting to see that gaming is for everybody, even if you can't play, because you can watch and engage with a show and share into that love. Or it's accessible to somebody who may not be able to get the book in physical copy, but they could get a PDF. And it's accessible for people, who can't do a real life game or in person game. Here's the internet, and you can play with anybody all across the world. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of collaborative storytelling being shared with all these people with different perspectives and great stories to be able to tell with their friends and having fun.
Oh, definitely. And it's one of those things I know, like I don't really have a lot of time for tabletop gaming, so I'll find myself when I work at night having a Twitch channel up of just watching other people gaming and being able to interact with them while they're gaming. Maybe not necessarily like while they're doing their monologues or rolling the dice for combat, but it's nice to kind of be a part of that table without even having to play, just being able to watch and experience it from week to week.
Yeah, for sure. And it becomes a gateway for so many other people to get into the game. Again, that's how I found out about tabletop gaming was with Twitch live streams. And that's how I taught myself too, was through Twitch live streams. I didn't have access to the books. I was like, well, okay, I think I know what I'm doing just based off what I'm watching and what I'm seeing.
Hmm.
But yeah, and I think even with all these, we're also starting to kind of grow and, having more diverse and inclusive shows and really, again, pushing forward that idea that tabletop gaming is for everybody because, representation is very important with these type of things. So we're getting to the point, and I think we're getting to the point where we're really starting to push for showing that everyone belongs and
Hmm.
showing that, everyone has a story to tell and the hobby should be for them as well.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I know I've definitely been seeing it more, obviously on like the internet side of things and podcast side of things. But I really think in the next few years, as far as gaming conventions go or in person, like at the table, like comic shops or gaming stores, you're definitely going to see more of that inclusivity. At least I really hope so.
Yeah, for sure. And it's because that's just being able to see all these people. That's so that that message. Hey, you also belong here. I mean, after that one first shitty experience that I had at the table, I was like, maybe it's not for me, right? Maybe it's not for me as a queer woman of color. But then kind of watching again and seeing all these rad, women on streams, queer people on streams, and people of color on streams, and not just on streams, but also in the Twitter community, creating, talking, being part of the community. And I was like, that's what kind of gave me hope. And one of the things that I hope to do, just by being a presence online, by being on streams, is that somebody could look at me and be like, "She's playing, so can I." And so that's kind of like if one person does that, if one person who doesn't feel like they belong looks at me and says, "She belongs, so do I," then I think I consider that a job well done. um, and kind of bringing everything full circle for me.
And that is a wonderful sentiment to end on. So, Kienna, for those who have listened to this podcast episode and they'd like to follow you on social media, what are some of the best places to do so?
Well, the best place is over on Twitter. You can follow me over at Kienna S, Kiennas, which is the best way to figure out what I am doing, because I am all over the internet, playing role-playing games, being part of the podcast, whatever, almost every day of the week. Please come and say hi. I love talking to people. I love meeting new people in the community, and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. And I know you said you're a part of a lot of like Twitch streams and stuff. Do you just announce that on your Twitter, or do you have like a calendar that is like a weekly, hey, this is what I'm doing every week type calendar?
Yeah. So I in my Twitter header, I have a schedule there. And also I tweet out every time I'm about an hour from going live and when I'm going live. So again, Twitter is the best way to keep up with me and all of the shenanigans I do.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will definitely have that in the show notes, and I hope people go and take a look at your Twitter and get to experience some of the games that you are in, because I know that you've been bouncing around with some really great games that as of recently. I think there's one I tried to catch you on. You had dressed up really cool, and I was like, oh dang, I can't believe I missed getting to watch that game. But definitely going to be on the lookout for the next games that you are a part of.
I appreciate it. Yeah. In terms of other things that I do, the one thing I will plug, which you'll see if you're on my Twitter, it's again, I'm a university student. I'm finishing my last year of university undergrad. But part of that is doing a final senior honors project, which is basically like a thesis. And I'm doing mine on D&D and live streaming, and basically how putting D&D games on Twitch with its real-time interactions and be able to incorporate an audience has created very unique collaborative narratives. And so I'm hoping to do a survey and analyzing how that works out, and then eventually creating a guide for anybody interested in D&D live streaming. And so I'm kind of looking for people who are interested in talking with me about it, particularly live streamers and their community. So if you know anybody, I have a pinned tweet which has a video explaining more about it, and a form to fill out. So yeah, that's basically, I'm mixing my school and my tabletop life all together because this is my life now.
And why not?
Yeah, I might as well do my final project on something that I love.
Exactly. Well, Kienna, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule tonight and recording with me. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I will continue to follow what you do and see what happens, and just hope good things for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you asking me on and letting me talk about all the passions and all that stuff. And I really look forward to all the other interviews that you do, because you do great work as well.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.